Hi, welcome back. Let's begin with a prayer in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Before I begin, I just want to say to all of my students who are a diverse mix of races and nationalities that in light of recent events, I just want you to know that I am disgusted and horrified by what was done to that poor man, Mr. Floyd. And I just want you to know that if in any way you feel that the world has become a more frightening place, I just want you to know that I care about each and every one of you, and that I will always have your back, and you can always call upon me to help you in whatever way I might be able to. So I think it's important for us to support each other, and for you to remember as well that there's a lot of people who care about you and support you. So do not be afraid. The world has its challenges, but it's got a lot of doors open to opportunity as well, and a lot of people out there who will care about you and support you. So today we come to the next topic, which has to do with violations of principle number 2. So remember, I said there's two basic principles. If you know these two principles, then you can, from that, figure out any of the Catholic moral teachings as regards sexuality. So the first principle was that sex is for marriage. And of course, that means that it would be wrongful for two unmarried people to be having sex. And it would also be wrongful for a married person to be having sexual relations with someone who is not his or her spouse. That's principle number 1. Principle number 2 is that the purpose of sexual union, the conjugal act, is love and life. The union of the spouses in love and the procreation of human life. So love and life, or if you want, bonding and babies. So therefore, when it comes to those two things, love and life, regarding life, it is wrongful for anyone to make an intervention through technology in order to suppress the power of the conjugal act to bear fruit in life. And that was what we were focusing on last time in the presentation on birth control. So now I'm going to focus on that other word, love. It's important to say in that context that life is God's work. It is God who has designed things this way. It is God who decides how new life comes into existence. And he has already decided this by the way he has created us. God has decided that human life has such worth that it must be loved into existence. That is, loved into existence by a specific act of love, a sharing of the conjugal act in which husband and wife are making a gift of themselves to each other in love. I'm sorry to have to keep repeating this, but I'm trying to get the point across that love bears fruit in life. So this would mean that any effort to bring life into being apart from the conjugal act in which the husband and wife make that gift of themselves to each other in love would be wrongful. So any attempt to bring human life into existence apart from the sharing of love in the conjugal act would be gravely sinful. Last quarter, you had a project about reproductive technologies. What you saw from videos such as Anonymous Father's Day, Eggsploitation, or hashtag Big Fertility was this dark side of reproductive technologies. What you saw in those videos was people having very good intentions and who thought they were doing something very good for somebody else, being, in the end, exploited and hurt, and actually in some cases dead. My point in showing these videos isn't so much to say that, oh, look at the bad effects of this, therefore these are wrong. That'd be almost a kind of consequentialism. Not quite. I mean, as I told you before, I am trying to tell you what God told me to tell you, and part of that is helping you understand the ways of God's creation and the basic principles that explain why these technologies are wrongful. But I'm showing you these other things, the side effects of this, all the people who are being hurt by these technologies, as a way of inviting you to consider that, I mean, if you haven't thought this through before, that, wow, maybe if people are getting hurt this way, then maybe this is not just a small bad side effect of a good technology. Maybe if so many people are getting so profoundly hurt, maybe the technology itself is something that's wrong and something that we really should not be doing, which in the end is the point. These things are wrongful and we shouldn't be doing them. So then if you're willing to consider that, maybe you can hear, as I put it, what God told me to tell you, namely, as I said, any attempt to create new human life apart from the sharing of love or sexual union of the spouses is gravely wrong and sinful. In God's plan, the husband and wife work together in concert with God in this act of procreation, bringing new life into existence as the fruit of their love. When human beings remove the creation of life from this context of the love of the husband and wife, they no longer see life as the fruit of love and a gift from God, but instead they begin to see life as their own creation, and they act like it. Humans think and act like little gods, treating human life like a product that they can manufacture, manipulate, buy, and sell. Now this is called, here comes important vocabulary, the commodification of human life. Again, what is commodification of human life? Treating human life like a product that people can manufacture, manipulate, buy, and sell. Here are some other very important moral considerations when thinking about the reproductive technologies. First, a child conceived through reproductive technologies indeed has a soul and is made in the image and likeness of God and is worthy of love and respect. The way a person is conceived does not take away their humanity and dignity. However, the way a child is conceived can also be disrespectful to that same child's very dignity. It is not right, or would not be right, to say to a child conceived through these technologies, well, you're here, aren't you? So stop complaining about what was done to bring you here. No, that child's suffering and the disrespect to their dignity deserve to be acknowledged. We should listen to these people so as to understand why the process that brought them here needs to stop. Second, universal moral principle: the end does not justify the means. The goal or end might be this beautiful baby resting in his mother's arms. That's a beautiful picture. People might say, how could anyone have a problem with this? However, as beautiful as that is, the question remains, what was the means by which this baby got here? The question matters. If you started, for example, to ask about the pregnancy and the mother told you, Well, no, I didn't have this baby myself. I bought it. Would you have a problem with that? Or would you just say that, well, as long as mother and baby just seem happy together, whatever got that baby here is okay? I think you can see that the question matters. The end, the picture perfect scene of the mother holding her baby, does not justify or make right what was done in order to get the baby there. So there's a separate question we have to ask. What was done? Is that right or is that wrong? Next, it is important to understand that a child is a gift and should be viewed and appreciated as a gift. A child is not a right or an entitlement. Some people try to justify the reproductive technologies by saying that what if they've tried everything else and none of it worked? So they have to do this now. Why can't they do this? Why can't they use these reproductive technologies? Do you see the assumption at work here? That it's a given fact that this couple is entitled to a child because they very much want one? So therefore, if they tried to do it the right way and it wasn't successful, therefore they have the right to get it some other way that's not the right way. It's as if wanting something badly enough somehow gives you the right to have it, a right to get what you feel you need to be happy on your terms. But no one has a right to a person. No one has a right to a child. Here's another very important principle. Spouses have a right to become a father and mother only through each other. When two people are married and they promise to be faithful, this vow means, first of all, that the husband gives his wife the right to be the only woman that he will have sex with. And the wife gives her husband the right to be the only man that she will have sex with. By this same vow of fidelity, being faithful, the husband gives his wife the right to be the only woman he will have children with. And she gives her husband the right to be the only man she will have children with. So the vow of fidelity, being faithful to each other, applies not only to having sex exclusively with one spouse, but it extends to having children exclusively with one spouse. When we get down to specifics, we'll see how this principle will apply. Next, technological interventions in the generation of human life, whether it be donating or buying sperm and eggs, in vitro fertilization, artificial insemination, all lead to, as I mentioned, the commodification of human life. In other words, human life, rather than be welcomed and loved as a gift from God, becomes a consumer product, bought and sold and subject to market forces and quality control. Commodification of human life is deeply offensive to human dignity, treating a person like a product. Finally, there's this. Couples who are not able to have a child due to infertility suffer tremendously. Some people will say that the weight of this grief of not being able to have children is as serious as feeling the grief that comes from losing a close family member. It is very hard. But remember, as I always tell you, when there's something good that you want, there are things that you can do to obtain it, but there are also lines that you must not cross. What I'm telling you about is one of those lines. And when you come against a line that you must not cross, and you cannot have a thing that you want so badly, what's happened is that you have encountered a situation that you must accept. Again, I know it is very hard, but it is far, far better to accept the will of God, as difficult as it is, than to violate his laws, which protect us and protect other people. No couple is entitled to a child. No one has a right to a child. A child is a gift from God. God's plan for a child to come into the world is to be the fruit of love. Anything else, such as conceiving a child in a glass dish, is disrespectful to that child's dignity. So let me now address some of these technologies more specifically. Artificial insemination. This means injecting sperm into a woman's uterus for the purpose of conceiving a child. Once again, it is disrespectful to the dignity of the child to be conceived in a process that is not the fruit of an act of love between husband and wife. So again, if I'm asking you, like, why is this wrong? What I just said would be the number one answer to that question. Second, artificial insemination can also violate fidelity in marriage. If the husband and wife use sperm that is not the sperm of the husband, then it is violating the fidelity of marriage. Remember, by the marriage vow, the husband gives the wife the right to be the only woman he will have children with, and the wife gives her husband the right to be the only man she will have children with. If the woman is being inseminated by sperm that is not the sperm of her husband, then she is violating that fidelity. She is having a child with a man who is not her husband. Next, it is also wrong because the couple is disregarding certain harms that will result for the child, or very well may result for the child. Many children who are conceived by the egg of their mother and the sperm of an anonymous donor suffer genetic bewilderment. Genetic bewilderment is a difficulty forming one's identity due to a lack of knowledge of one's origins. Since sperm donors are guaranteed confidentiality as part of the donation process, their children are given only basic necessary medical information about their father. They may not know anything about their father's race, nationality, or personal history. Some people conceived by artificial insemination actually make great efforts to find the identity of their father or of their half-siblings. There are actually websites for this. People who have been conceived by donor sperm will go on the internet and try to find out if there's anyone else out there who was conceived from sperm from the same clinic and from the same number donor. They do this to see if they have half-siblings out there and who they might be, and even try to connect with them. This also creates this other problem that children conceived by the same donor could accidentally commit incest if they meet and conceive children together. This may seem like a weird type of scenario that two people conceived by the same donor sperm might actually meet each other, fall in love, and have children together. There was one situation in New York City where a woman started looking up on the internet how many other people used the same donor sperm that she did, and she was able to establish that at least 150 people had used the sperm from the same donor that she used, which would mean that her child would have at least 150 half-siblings. So the thought that two of those people might meet up, unlikely but possible. Now let's talk about in vitro fertilization, what is also known as test tube babies. This means that egg and sperm are placed in a glass dish, and new life is conceived. This new life, the new embryo, is then implanted in the uterus of the mother. If the embryo adheres to the wall of the uterus, it begins to develop and form the placenta and eventually will be born. As with artificial insemination, a child that is conceived and brought to birth in this way is not the fruit of the love of the parents. I know some people protest vigorously against this. They say, well, of course it's the fruit of our love because our love for each other motivated us to go through this whole process. And I don't doubt that they love each other, and I don't doubt that love was part of the motivation behind what they're doing. But my point is that life began because a laboratory technician came in one morning and put the sperm into the glass dish containing the egg. And that laboratory technician doing that, it does not bring the love of the couple to that moment. Remember, with procreation, it's the couples together in one same act, making a personal gift of themselves to each other in love, and that love of that moment and of that act bearing fruit in life. So having or conceiving a child in this way violates God's plan that life must proceed from the gift of love. As with artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization violates the marriage vow if the couple is choosing to use donated egg or sperm from a third party. In other words, if they are doing in vitro fertilization using the egg of a woman who is not the wife or sperm from a man who is not the husband. There are also other ethical problems with in vitro fertilization. One would be that the donated sperm, if they're using donated sperm, are obtained through masturbation, which in itself, as I've explained, is a sinful act, usually facilitated in the donor clinics with the help of pornography. This process disrespects the value of human life at its earlier stages. Doctors actually will not implant just one embryo. Actually, they will create many embryos, and they might implant as many as 4, expecting that some of them will not survive. On average, 6 or 7 embryos are going to be destroyed or die for the sake of creating one successful pregnancy. And then there's this other thing that they will do if it turns out that they've implanted 4 or 5 embryos and all of them survive. It's called embryo reduction. It means that if all these 4 or 5 embryos implant successfully, then the doctors will try to reduce or lower the number of living embryos that are growing inside the mother's womb. And they'll do this by using that abortion method that involves lethal injection. They will try to inject what seem to be the smallest or the weakest embryos in order to end those lives directly on purpose so that the others will have more space to grow and develop. And then comes the question of what happens to the extra embryos. I should mention that in the United States of America, there are very few laws regulating the reproductive technologies. You may have noticed this in some of the videos that I had you watch earlier this year. People often refer to the United States as the Wild West of reproductive technologies. So whereas other countries, for example, will only allow the creation of the number of embryos that will be implanted, in the United States they may create as many as a dozen embryos. And if they implant 3 or 4 or 5 and a pregnancy results and the couple does not want more than one, well, what happens to the remaining 5 or 6 embryos? Well, they go into cryogenic storage, that is frozen storage, without any plan for their future. So think about this. All of this casual creating disposing of, risking, freezing of human life without any plan for the future is horribly disrespectful to God, the Lord of life, and to the human beings whose lives are regarded as disposable. In fact, there's another thing that they do sometimes, which is called PGD, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. It means before they implant the embryos, they'll test them for certain genetic abnormalities or diseases. And the ones that might have that, those embryos are destroyed. Again, it's a very casual way to deal with what is human life. Another important fact to consider is that there is widely accepted evidence that children conceived in this way, through in vitro fertilization, have a higher risk of certain genetic abnormalities, as well as higher risk of obesity, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes later in life. This process, along with artificial insemination, lends itself to all kinds of commodification. I could give you any number of examples of this. For example, back in the year 2010, a social networking website was set up called Beautiful People. In order to join this social network, a committee of people had to approve you as being beautiful enough to belong to it. And at that time, they also advertised a sperm bank and an egg donor program so that people within that network would be able to obtain sperm or eggs from beautiful people so that their children would be beautiful people. Other examples would be simply the profiles that people go to when they go to a sperm bank or searching for an egg donor. They might be looking for someone who's of a particular race. They might be looking for someone who went to med school, who graduated at the top of their class, who was a virtuoso musician or an artist. I mean, think about this. If a couple's going to say, oh, well, we're going to take the egg of the top student from this medical school, and we're going to take the sperm from this guy who was the captain of the football team, well, we're going to have a baby that's going to be smart and beautiful or something like that. Do you see how this sounds like a manufacturing process rather than accepting the child as they are, as a gift from God with all their strengths, all their weaknesses, and just loving them as they are? Then there's this interesting fact about Brazil. Brazil is one of the main importers of sperm from the United States. Yes, it's United States sperm is sold internationally. And those who are purchasing that, they value especially sperm from people who are blonde, blue-eyed, and light-skinned. So the result is that you find people in Brazil having those qualities which are really not common among the native population there. Here's also some practical issues regarding in vitro fertilization. First of all, there's the cost. The average cost for one attempt to have a child by this method in New York City is $8,242. Often the medical insurance does not cover in vitro fertilization, so that comes out of the couple's pocket. Also, the success rate is usually lower than people expect, especially when it comes to older women. A woman who's younger than 35 has about a 40% chance of having a child with each attempt. However, a woman who's between 41 and 42 years old has an 11.7% chance of having a baby as a result of each attempt. So that would mean a 41-year-old woman who has to try 9 times to have a baby through IVF and who pays, let's say, the average cost would be spending about $70,000 to have that one baby. And think also about the emotional toll it must take on a woman who tries, 2, 3, 4 times and gets all of her hopes up only to be disappointed when it doesn't work. Now let me say something about surrogate motherhood. After an embryo is conceived by in vitro fertilization, a third party, not the donor of the egg, is then contracted to bring the embryo to term. So, since bearing a child is part of motherhood, part of having a baby, this once again violates fidelity in marriage. If a husband promises his wife he will be a father only through her, and then he hires a surrogate to carry the child, well, since she's carrying it in a very real way, he's becoming a father through the surrogate mother, the gestational carrier. Then there's the further problem of the exploitation of women. Who is going to be accepting these jobs, as it were, of being gestational mothers? It's going to be women who struggle in poverty and for whom whatever money is being offered is going to make a difference for them in their lives. Women who are comfortably well off are not going to be doing this. So that means that certain women who struggle in poverty will be spending an important part of their childbearing years renting their wombs instead of bearing their own children in a marriage. And finally, what you would have seen in that video, #BigFertility, is that the dignity of these women is not respected. They often go into these arrangements with some thought that because they are so closely connected to this child that they are bearing, that somehow there will be a meaningful relationship between them and the child and the family. But no, the people who are hiring her do not see her as having any necessary connection to the child or the family. And so it's often the experience of these women that while they're expecting to have some kind of enduring connection here, that as soon as the child is born, the child is taken away, she's paid whatever they agreed to pay her, and she is cut off. They don't want to see her anymore. They don't want her part of the family. And it hurts. And we also see cases where if this child is seen to have some kind of even minor physical anomaly, that the gestational mother is told that she has to terminate the pregnancy. But you see, you can't just treat her like she's an employee with no kind of investment in this child or connection with this child. Of course she's connected, and she is a mother to this child. And so sometimes the women will simply refuse to do this. And if they do, they have the same kind of a loss and grief as any woman would have after an abortion. Next is the issue of the sale or donation of egg or sperm for purposes of artificial insemination or in vitro fertilization. If you saw, for example, the movie Eggsploitation, one thing you would have learned is that in colleges, there are advertisements in the college newspaper trying to recruit young women to be egg donors. And once again, yes, this would be wrongful. To be a sperm donor or an egg donor for the sake of someone using that egg or sperm in conceiving a child constitutes a form of cooperation in the wrongful practices of in vitro fertilization and artificial insemination. And also because money is exchanged, it contributes to the commodification of human life. So although they may call it sperm donation or egg donation, there is practically always some kind of a monetary incentive that's involved there beyond the covering of medical costs. For men, there's the further problem when it comes to sperm donation that in order to be able to donate the sperm, they're going to be masturbating with the help of pornography, and that in itself would be a sinful means. For women, there's also the moral and medical issue of risking their health for the sake of the financial compensation. There are dangerous side effects to some of the drugs that are used in the egg donation process, specifically Lupron. Also, if you saw that movie Exploitation, you would have also seen that there are no studies on the long-term health risks of egg donation. So they may get all kinds of assurances that it's safe, but there's really no studies that demonstrate its safety. So to end on a more positive note, I'm going to tell you about what couples can do if they're struggling with infertility. These things are perfectly acceptable in Catholic moral theology. One thing they could do is surgery to correct endometriosis. This kind of surgery sometimes gives a woman a better chance of conceiving a child than in vitro fertilization does. Then there is natural procreative technology, also referred to as NAPRO technologies. Doctors who are trained in NAPRO technology will do their best to get to the root causes of infertility. They will look at a woman's cycle and they'll look at her hormonal levels, and if necessary, give her hormonal supplements so that she'll be able to carry a pregnancy to term. There have been cases in which couples that have not been able to conceive and bear children through in vitro fertilization have actually been successful using NAPRO technology. Another advantage of NAPRO is that insurance plans normally will cover this, whereas they will not cover in vitro fertilization. If you think you might know anyone interested in looking into NAPRO technology, the place where it is offered in New York City is the Gianna Center, which is near Times Square in the city, and the director is Dr. Ann Nolte. This other story came to mind that I wanted just to add here. A few years ago, I was preaching at a local church on a Sunday, and my topic was this very issue of reproductive technologies that I've just explained to you. After the Mass, a woman came up to talk to me and told me that she had actually given birth through in vitro fertilization, and no one had ever told her that there were any moral concerns about this. So during the conversation, I asked her how many embryos had been implanted, and she said 3. And I asked, well, how many children were born? And she said, oh, 3. And she's then pointed and said, look, and there were these 3 beautiful children standing right there. And as I was going home, I was thinking to myself how this illustrated the moral issues at stake. I mean, undeniably, these were 3 very beautiful children. Yet at the same time, when she underwent this procedure, did she understand that when they implanted 3, the plan was pretty much to put two of them or one of them at risk with the hope that one would eventually be born? And if she had known that, if she had known that they're making that kind of calculation about these 3 lives, would she have agreed to do this procedure? And you might even ask yourself, should human beings even be making these kinds of decisions and treating human life in this way? Or isn't it best to leave the mystery of life in the hands of God, who is life's creator and destiny? Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video.